So now, at this point, we know a couple of things. We learned about DOM interaction. And that's a complex term. With that, I mean that we learned how to make a part of the DOM the template of our Vue app by mounting the Vue app to it. We learned about data binding with vbind and string interpolation, and also vHTML. And we learned about event handling with vOn, but also with vModel. To be precise, vModel is two-way binding and therefore the combination of data binding and event handling, so to say. Now it's time to dive into a third big block that makes up Vue. This block has no official name, but I like to call it advanced reactivity. Vue is very reactive. We already see that in a lot of places. When I type here, the name here updates and Vue does that for us. The same if we change the counter. So that all works. But we have even more features than what we know about thus far. And I want to start by coming back to methods besides using them with events, and then show you a better alternative to methods for certain use cases. Now, in this app here, we added two-way binding, but to add it, we had to get rid of our last name here. Now, that's not too bad, because the way we made the entered name a full name by adding a last name wasn't ideal anyways. Using this setName method, passing in this argument, it worked, but as you see, as soon as you want to do more, for example, adding a reset functionality, it's pretty hard to implement it like this. That's why we had to get rid of it. But that's no problem. We can output a full name here in a different way. For example, we can add a new method. Anywhere where you want, by the way, the order of methods here does not play a role. So I will add it at the top. And I will name it output full name, because that's what this method should do. It should return something, because I'm not going to use it to bind it to an event, but instead I'm going to use it to call it here in the curly braces. I want to call output full name like this. And therefore I want to get back the full name here, which then will be inserted in this part of the HTML code. And therefore here I want to return this name, which is the entered name. So this name property, which we're managing with vModel, plus a blank space, plus Schwarzmüller. And of course, this Schwarzmüller could also be fetched from another input. Here, it's simply hard-coded. And if I now save that and reload, we see Schwarzmüller here at the beginning. And if I enter Maximilian, we see Maximilian Schwarzmüller. Now, since I'm using a method, we can even add an if check and check if this name is currently empty. And if it is empty, we just return an empty string here, so that we only add Schwarzmüller if the name is not empty. So here we leverage the fact that we're having a method to return different values based on different values in name. And with that, if I save this and reload, we make sure that we initially don't see anything, and we only see full name with Schwarzmüller included if I did enter a real name. And as soon as that's empty again, the full name is gone. So that's pretty nice. However, it's not the best way of doing that. Now, why is that not the best way of doing it? Well, if I type here, we update the name and output it down there. That's good. The problem is, if I press this counter button, we don't see a problem, but behind the scenes, Vue does something which is not ideal. When we change the counter, Vue basically tries to find out where on this page it needs to update the rendered page. So for example, if the counter changes, Vue sees that in this paragraph we're using the counter, and hence it needs to, well, update this part here on the real page. That's exactly why we use Vue. It updates the page for us automatically. The problem is, if we call a method like this here, this method will also be re-executed by Vue whenever anything on the page changes, because Vue can't know what this method does. It doesn't know whether maybe the counter gets used in there. Well, if the counter changed and this method maybe uses the counter, this method should be re-executed, right? Well, and for that reason, Vue goes ahead and re-executes any method you're using anywhere in your HTML code between curly braces or with vbind or with vhtml. So any non-event bound method will be re-executed by Vue whenever anything on the screen changes. Even if, like in this case, we know that in this method we're not using the counter. We know it, but Vue doesn't. And from a performance perspective, that's not so great. And we can see this, by the way. We can add a console log here, running again. And if I now increase this a little bit, open up the browser developer tools and go to the JavaScript console part, you will see that if I reload here, we see running again initially. But if I change the counter, we also see running again being executed over and over again, even though we just changed the counter. Still, output full name was executed again for the reasons I just specified. And that's not a bug, that's how Vue works. And that's why methods are not the best solution for outputting some dynamically calculated value like this. But what is a better solution then?